income tax rates and eliminate tax breaks, including the mortgage interest deduction. That's a controversial one because I think a lot of people look at home ownership as a way to profit from saving on the tax front.
But then they can go up to a certain dollar amount you can deduct. I mean, you can't deduct $28 million in interest. There needs to be certain limits,
Well, mathematically, apparently it works, but as you can imagine, this will be a fight in the Congress. I don't think this will be easy, but if they were successful, it would reduce the annual deficit from $1.3 trillion this year to about $400 billion by 2015, which is significant. And it would reduce the $13.7 trillion national debt that we live with today.
And it will give the 300 million people, the entire population of the United States of America, a reason to go to work hard to create more wealth. And I really think that should not be taken away from people.
I hope whatever comes of this deficit plan, that people become smarter, not just about their spending habits, but that Congress follows the people and becomes smarter about its spending habits, too.
We all know we actually import a lot more than what we export. And much of that import comes from China. So Fortune magazine did a very small survey at the port of New Jersey and New York. Did you know that the amount of containers that come in, and take a look at this picture, 45% of them go back empty.
Wow.
I mean, imagine 100 containers come in full of goods, and only 55 of them go out full of goods. 45 go back empty. For every container that we export, there's 1.8 containers that we import. You know, New York, New Jersey port at one time was one of the largest ports in the world in the 1990s. But today, China has 6 of the largest ports from which they ship the goods. And New York has fallen to the 21st number. I mean, imagine how much we are importing. So this freshman class of senators and congressmen, they need to pay attention to this one.
I agree. I mean, look at President Obama's trip to Asia recently, right? He went simply to try to highlight this imbalance of import versus export and to try to get the countries to open up their trade so that we could export more to them. But he came across some frostiness. He did not get the warm reception that he was looking for, and he didn't walk away with anything concrete, not even out of the G20 summit, which was, unfortunately, some are calling that a failed mission.
But, you know, we don't need to ask people to buy from us. We first need to produce something to sell it to them. That's the important part.
You read my mind. You know, all this criticism I'm reading about this trip overseas for President Obama, and it seemed to me that he went there with this notion of pleading for these countries to open up their borders, which I think is the wrong stance to take. I think the focus should be on domestic production and concentrating on improving our own in-house industries, which we haven't done for decades.
That's right.
Well, folks, all this talk about business and business schools are now changing their strategy for how they teach. This is an article I saw out of Bloomberg Business Week, which caught my eye because business schools, as a result of the market crash, as a result of our financial climate, can't teach business the way they're used to teaching it. They've had to make some changes. And I thought the types of focus areas for the business schools and what they're looking at doing these days differs so significantly than what they used to do, you know, just a few years ago. Let me read you this quote. The financial crisis revealed fault lines that no business school is structured to address. When it is clear the institutional context of business has failed us, most business schools are isolated from the domains of knowledge necessary to redress those failures, such as the environmental and policy schools and great character and becoming consequential leaders. In other words, you're sensing a strong moral strain show up in these business schools for teaching their students about risk, about failure, and how to survive in an economically depressed time. You know, for years, business schools are very competitive, and they're taught how to be competitive, how to make the most money you can possibly make, and how to really pile on the riches. But these days, they've had to adjust their attitudes, and I think fundamentally it's a very good thing. The quote I read you was from Mr. Blair Shepard, who's the dean of the School of Business at the Duke University. Let me read you one more quote. This is from the Wharton School of Business. B schools are changing how they teach. There are maybe three major reasons. One is managing under uncertainty. Another is public policy. We discovered our students didn't necessarily know very much about government and public policy. And many schools will have more emphasis on ethics and corporate governance. We've been teaching ethics for 30 years, and I think for the ethics and legal studies faculty, this is fodder for their courses. I think these are fundamentals that should have always been part of business, but the focus was in the wrong place. So it's good to see that these schools have adjusted themselves. And in fact, they're offering their students a lot more help even in finding jobs because, as you know, many of the students who graduated from business school in the last couple of years have had trouble finding jobs.
It has always been how to make more money, how to get a better job with more money, and so on and so forth. But now the focus is on ethics,
That's right.
And it goes back again, many years ago when I was a member of the Rotary Club. The fundamental question every businessman has to ask is this good for the society? Is it good for the people that I am serving? Is it good for my family? Is it profitable so that I can hire more people? Profit's not a bad word. But you got to have,
it's become ruthless over the last few years.
And you have to sell a product that's actually useful to them. I'm not saying that we are suffering terribly. We are doing well. The green shoots are up there. In fact, I read a story in a New Yorker, which is really funny. All of us used to eat vegetables in our country back home. Because meat was scarce. Meat was, you celebrated with the meat.
Yeah.
Saturday, Sunday, you ate meat. Otherwise, you ate vegetables. There is a new appreciation around the country now for vegetables. Mario Batali, he started Meatless Monday in New York City. In other words, his restaurant does not serve meat on Monday. Monday being the slowest night, and what they have found out that they can actually get a lot more patrons up there. He has even got a vegetable butcher.
Wow.
They call vegetables dirt candy.
It's clever marketing. I have to give him credit for trying to at least make the vegetables seem sexier, right? Which is what they're trying to do. It is kind of a sad thing. It used to be, at least when I was younger, when I was growing up, at least in places like India, you used to know what the seasonal fruits and vegetables were.
Yes.
Because they weren't always available in certain times of the year. So when you had access and a chance to eat them, you ate them a lot because they were only available in limited quantities.
And they were cheap.
And they were
cheap. They're cheap.
What's happened now, because of our global trade, you can get pretty much any fruit at any time of the year.
That's right.
And we don't put a lot of emphasis on eating seasonal fruits. Maybe, we do with the pumpkin because of Halloween, but most of us really aren't aware of planting and seasonal cycles, which we should be.
The food has been grown around the world for a shelf life. It has to have a shelf life. It is not fresh. But some of these chefs up in New York or even here in Washington, D.C., they have come up with the idea that, no, vegetables are good for you and they're sexy. Meat is so boring. Today, you go to some of the finest restaurants, meat is like a side dish. Vegetables are really cooked up and presented so nicely. I am becoming a veggie-vor.